You saved me. Otherwise, I would have been in soup. Thank you. Thank you, Prashant. Thanks a lot. So, yeah. So, though there are other social contractualist thinkers in the 20th century, when we talk about the social contractualists, we talk about three people who originally talked about the social contract. Okay. The first of them is Thomas Hobbes. The second is John Locke. The third is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Okay. Uh, all of them are bound together by the fact that they lived around the same time, even though uh, Hobbes is not exactly the contemporary of Locke or Rousseau, but Locke and Rousseau some years overlap. Okay, but you say that they were in the beginning of the modern period. They were thinkers, unlike Machiavelli, who was proto-modern. We see that uh, all these thinkers are modern thinkers. Okay, they all have an idea of a social contract, but that does not mean that they're talking about the same kind of contract. It doesn't mean that they are talking about uh, the same issues to be dealt with by the social contract. But you must remember that these people now are genuinely full-fledged modern thinkers, and without any problem we can now start using the term the state, written with a capital S. Okay, the state with a capital S. So it is with these people that the term the state acquires the meanings that it has. And this is now the modern institution that I said didn't exist in medieval and ancient times of any part of the world. It started, the modern period started in Europe, and it is with the modern period that you can possibly start talking about the common era. Even though people say what was first century AD is now first century CE or common era, the real common era begins with the modern period. We'll look into that as we go ahead. Now, Thomas Hobbes is a 16th and 17th century figure. Okay, he was born in the 16th century, died in the 17th century. I'm deliberately not giving you biographical details because otherwise I've seen, people have a tendency to fill up half the things will be he was born in so and so place and on so and so date in so and so year. That is not what we should be teaching. We should be teaching their ideas. And that is why I'm not giving you their dates. It's not that I don't know. I just want you to not focus on those aspects. You must focus on their ideas. So he's actually a 16th and 17th century figure. And he first wrote this book called The Behemoth, Behemoth. Behemoth. Behemoth is something which is very big. Okay, it is something which is very big. After that, he wrote the book that is of consequence to us, Leviathan. Now, Leviathan again means something which is very, very big. Okay. And in Christian lore, Leviathan actually has a negative meaning. In Christian lore, Leviathan is supposed to be one of the, what are these creatures called? Uh, Demons. Okay. Ghosts are souls of human beings in Christian lore, but demons are entities from hell. They have never had a human form. So one of the demons is supposed to be called Leviathan. Now, why Hobbes chose Leviathan, I don't know. For him, it is, I suppose, the idea that it is a size. And there is a poem by B.B. Shelley in which he talks about ships as oak leviathans. Okay, because in that time ships were built out of wood, and they were made out of oak. So he called them, the big ships, he called them oak leviathans. So again, it means something which is very big. He wrote these books in English. Then he wrote an essay in Latin. In Latin, it is called the Sieve, which when translated into English, it becomes the Citizen. But let me categorically state it here. We don't really have to worry about the behemoth. We don't have to worry about the citizen. What we have to concern ourselves is mainly the Leviathan. Now, the other social contractualist, the second social contractualist, is John Locke. Okay, please remember that it is Locke with an E in the end. Okay, my political philosophy teacher in my MA days, Sudipto Kaviraj, truly remarkable man, truly remarkable man. I had the great fortune of being taught by him. Failed a student in an in a mid-term sessional because he wrote John Locke's name as Johnlock. He didn't write the E. He said, if you don't even know the spelling, that means what do you know about him? Sudipto Kaviraj was a very soft man, but he said, I will fail you. So this boy apologized and he passed him. But get that spelling very right. If somebody decides that, you have written a wrong spelling, you can get into trouble. The main works of Locke are an essay concerning human understanding. This is more than a political treatise. It is something which goes into the emergence of schools of thought like positivism and empiricism, which we discussed briefly while we were doing Plato. This is a seminal work of his in the modern period. And then the other work, which is of consequence to us, is the two treatises of government. Now, both Thomas Hobbes and John Locke were Englishmen. Okay, and Locke belonged to the 17th and 18th century. All right, so there's a very brief overlap between Hobbes and Locke. All right. But by that time, Hobbes had been exiled. He was not in England. Now, the third person to have used this particular uh, idea of a social contract is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Okay. He was a Frenchman of the 18th century. Okay. His best known works are the Social Contract. Of all the three people who talked about the social contract, he's the only one who he's the only one who uh, basically, what should I say, wrote a book with that name, The Social Contract. It is in French, it was called Contra Social. Okay, but don't worry about the French bit. But his first really big work, famous work, not a big work, was an essay which is called A Discourse on Inequality. Okay, it was his first very well known essay. Okay, and I told you when talking about Plato that apart from Plato, Rousseau is the other philosopher who emphasizes on the necessity of proper education. So if you look at that, you will see that Rousseau wrote this book called the Emile, Emile. Emile is the name, it's a French name. And Emile was an imaginary student that Rousseau was educating. Okay, in one of the books that I wrote, there is a large section dedicated to this. Uh, and this Emile is also called, has been translated by some people into English as On Education. That is not a very good translation. Please call it Emile. And he also wrote another work called Confessions. Okay. Now, he was a Frenchman, but he was born in Geneva. His Geneva is in present day Switzerland, but in those days it was an independent city state. It was an independent city state, so he was called a Genevan. And he was a citizen of Geneva. Not everybody in that city state of Geneva could be called citizens. His father was a citizen, and Rousseau also became a citizen. Uh, for some time, he was in Italy, and later on, he came back to Geneva. And Rousseau is somebody who wanted to have city states and not nation states. Okay, he believed that nation states were very bad. What we have as India, as United States of America, these are nation states. He believed that they are very bad, and he believed in the idea of city states. And he even liked the idea of a commune. A commune is normally, today we call gated communities, right? So think of these as gated communities. except that they were not gated. These were groups of people living together, living a commodious life of interdependence. They helped each other, and there was nobody who was the head of the commune. There was nobody who was the tail of the commune. So everybody was equal in the commune. So he found that there was this particular commune called the Hermanonville. Okay, it's in the pronunciation in English will be like Hermanonville, but in French it is Hermanonville. It's a very difficult word to pronounce, and it was in the Oise. Oise is pronounced was, right? Was province of France, which was quite close to where Geneva was. Now, each of the thinkers is very different from the other or the others, even though they all should be, they call talk, it says, they all talk of a social contract. They all talk about a social contract, but they are all different. Hobbes is considered to be a modern thinker, but some people say he isn't a full-fledged modern thinker. He's on the cusp of modernity. Cusp is, see, if you look at the astro chart, okay, by date of birth, your sun sign is created, isn't it? So the month will start with the 21st of, let's say, January, and will go on till the 22nd of, or rather, it'll start on the 22nd of January and go on till the 21st of February. So those who are born either on, uh, you know, uh, 20th or 21st of January are supposed to be born on, in the cusp where the transition is taking place. Or if you're born between uh, the 20 or 19 or 20 or whatever, I'm sorry. So those dates are again called the cusp. So you're not a pure, so if you're, say, if you're born between October 21st, October 22nd and November 21st, you're a Scorpio. But if you're born on November 22nd, you're not Sagittarius, but you're not Scorpio also. So that's called a cusp. So technically people will say, okay, since that is the date, we'll call him Sagittarius, 22nd. Or if he's born on 21st, you'll say, call him a Scorpio. But that is a cusp. So people say that he's on the cusp of modernity. He's not somebody who is a proper modern thinker. That is a subject of debate. We'll get into it when in a little while. He's also called a proto-liberal thinker. If you remember, when we were doing Machiavelli, I told you that Machiavelli is called a proto-modern thinker. Okay, he's a prototype of a modern thinker, but he's not the finished form of it. Okay, the finished form of it is the modern. Okay, a prototype is when you have an idea, I'm going to make a car. So how do you make a car? First, you go to a drawing board, you draw how the car will look. Then you make a clay model. From the clay model, then you beat sheet metal, put the thing together, assemble part by part, and then you'll put an engine in it. You'll say it'll have this kind of suspension, an independent suspension in the front and the back. All right, it'll have a rack and pinion steering, whatever. We will talk about all those things, and you'll create it's not a finished product, it's a rough product. It's not at all finished, but you start testing it. That is a prototype. Once you have ironed out all the glitches that are there, once you know that this car is going to perform well in the market, it is not going to create a problem, then you say, I launch the finished product. Okay. So a proto-modern is a prototype. Similarly, proto-liberal is a prototype of a liberal thinker. He's not a full-fledged liberal thinker. John Locke, on the other hand, is a full-fledged liberal thinker. And he's also called the father of liberalism. Though many people will try to tell you that it is Adam Smith who initiated liberalism, that is not true. It is John Locke who is really the first liberal thinker. And apart from the fact that he is a liberal thinker, also please remember that technically speaking, John Locke is not a political science person. He's not political scientist. The school that he belongs to is actually called the School of Political Economy, because in Locke's writing, there is as much economics as there is politics. Whereas if you look at Adam Smith, Adam Smith also had ideas very similar to Locke, but those were only economic ideas. They were very negligible amount of political ideas. So he's not really a political economist, though people will include him in the category of political economists. He's not really there. The first political economist in the world is John Locke. There are some people who will tell you Kautilya is a political economist. All that is rubbish. Okay. Political economy came into being with Locke and to a certain extent Adam Smith. Okay, and this form of political economy is called classical political economy. Rousseau also is sometimes considered to be a political economist, but not in the same way in which you find Locke. Okay, so Locke is a proper political economist, and he's called a classical political economist along with Adam Smith. Rousseau is occasionally referred to as a political economist, but you can consider Rousseau to be a part of what is today called the rational civilization. And also, he is a product of French Romanticism. Romanticism, I will explain later, not now. It is a specific tradition, and that is something that we will discuss when we come to Rousseau. Okay, romanticism comes, don't associate it with romance, though it really does share the root with that word romance. But for us, the idea of romance today is completely different from the idea of romanticism. For us, romance is this love and people running around trees and dancing. That was how it was when we were young. Now people perform drills in film. Tag, tag. One fellow will be dancing and some 2,000 back dancers will be there. Okay, so we call these as romances. The reason why these people were called romanticists were because they romanticized the past. Unlike other philosophers who tended to see the world as progressing from a not so good stage to a better and better stage, the romantics or the romanticists wanted to go back into the world. So the romantics are the ones who say, let's go back to nature. So you have Wordsworth, the poet. Why did he write poetry? What kind of poetry did he write? You must have read the Daffodil. He's talking about nature all the time. Okay. Or if you read his very celebrated work, a few lines return, lines written, what am I saying? Lines written a few miles above the Tintern Abbey, Tintern Abbey, or simply called Tintern Abbey, you will see that he describes nature. But at some point he says, behind all this beauty of nature, I can hear the still, sad music of humanity. So the romantic tradition is a bemoaning of the loss of the beauty of nature. It is anti-industrial civilization. I'll talk about that when we come to Rousseau. I'll talk about it in a little bit of depth. But please remember that romanticism at that time was considered to be pessimism. It was not something that people would have thought, is a good thing. The new civilization that came, they wouldn't think of it as a good thing. They saw it as a bad thing to have happened. Now, when we talk about Thomas Hobbes, the first thing that you should look at is that he's a part of a tradition which is called the Enlightenment tradition, and that has to be written with capital E and capital T. The Enlightenment tradition emphasized the quality of rationality in human beings. Okay, this is what we need to remember. Now, the Enlightenment, where did it happen? The Enlightenment actually happened in the Mediterranean region, in the city states of what is now Italy. You've heard of the Renaissance, I'm sure. Renaissance. Renaissance. If you translate Renaissance into English, it becomes Renaissance. R-E hyphen N-A-S-C-E-N-C-E. Renaissance. Nascent is just born. Okay. Renaissance is rebirth. It is not a new birth. Please remember this. The Renaissance is not a new birth. It is a rebirth. Rebirth of what? It is the rebirth of the traditions of the antiquity which are represented by ancient Greece. All the concerns of the Milesian school, the concerns of philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Seneca,